Picture a wall of trees so old that 4 grown men holding hands cannot reach around one trunk. Now fill the space between those trunks with darkness at noon, with the smell of wet leaf rot and bare, with vines thick as your wrist and canebrakes taller than a cabin roof. Add a river the colour of cold tea, a panther that screams like a dying woman, and soil so black and rich that a dropped seed corn will sprout where it falls. That's Kentucky in 1798. The richest land anyone in your family has ever seen, and the loneliest. A place where a man can raise more corn than his father ever dreamed of, and die of a scratch on his thumb because the nearest doctor is 4 days' ride away. A place where you can shoot your winter's meat in the morning and lose a child to the woods by evening. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists admiring the wilderness. We're living it. One day, one person. Everything would have seen, smelled, heard, and survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly I still have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just quietly fascinated by rattlesnakes and cabin smoke, and people washing in creeks in November. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. The fire is almost out. You know it before you open your eyes because the cold has come through the blanket and settled in your feet, and cold like that only comes when the coals have burned down past saving distance. And if the coals die, that is not an inconvenience. That is a disaster. There is no box of matches in this cabin. There is no box of matches in this county. Fire is kept, not made, and it is your job to keep it. And you have been asleep too long. You are out of the bed before you are properly awake. Bare feet on a puncheon floor. Split logs, flat side up. Adzed almost smooth, but not quite. And the almost matters, because a splinter in the foot out here can swell and turn and kill a person, and you have seen it happen. You feel your way across the dark cabin by memory. Table, bench, the wall of cold air near the door, and then the hearth, wide enough to lie down in, and the ash pile in the middle of it, grey and quiet. You kneel. The stones are barely warm through your knees. You take the iron fire poker. Its handle is so cold it feels wet, and you rake through the ashes gently, the way you'd feel through a hen's feathers for an egg. Ash rises and coats your tongue. It tastes like burnt bread and stone. There, one coal, the size of a walnut skinned in grey, with a seam of orange when you breathe on it. Your whole household is sleeping around you in the dark. Your father and mother behind the quilt hung across the far corner, your 2 sisters in the loft above your head, your little brother in the trundle bed you just climbed out of, and every one of their lives depends, in a small daily way, on what your hands do in the next 2 minutes. You reach into the tinderbox on the hearth ledge, shredded cedar bark, dry as paper, rolled between your palms until it's a bird's nest of fibre. You set the coal into the middle of it with 2 fingers, and the coal bites you, a small bright bite, and you don't drop it. Because dropping it means starting over with flint and steel and frozen hands, and you cup the nest and you blow, not hard, long and low, like blowing across the top of a jug. The coal brightens, dims, brightens. Smoke comes up into your face, cedar sweet and stinging, and your eyes water, and you keep blowing, and the smoke thickens, and then a sound like a whisper tearing. Flame. You feed it. Splinters first, fat pine that spits and flares, then finger-thick sticks, then the split oak, grey and heavy, each piece landing with a knock that echoes in the chimney. The light climbs the walls, and now you can see your own breath, hanging in the cabin air like smoke, because the fire has been low for hours, and the inside of your home is barely warmer than the November morning outside. Welcome to a homestead on Clear Creek, Kentucky, in the year 1798. You're lying, well, kneeling now, in a one-room log cabin, 16 feet by 20, that your father and 3 neighbours raised in 4 days 2 summers ago. The logs are chinked with clay and moss and small stones, and in a dozen places the chinking has cracked and fallen, and through those cracks all night the wind has been running its cold finger along your family's sleep. Your name is Samuel Tate. You're 15 years old. 2.5 years ago you walked here from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, 300 miles, through the Cumberland Gap on the Wilderness Road, driving 2 cows and carrying a bag of seed corn that your mother would not let anyone eat no matter how hungry the road made you. Back home, everyone said Kentucky was the best poor man's country on earth. They weren't wrong. They just didn't mention the price. The fire is talking now, snapping and settling, and the heat reaches your face like an open hand. You could sit here. You want to sit here. But the cows are bawling in the pen, low and impatient, and there's frost on the inside of the door, and the day does not wait for a boy who wants to be warm. You dress by firelight. A linsey-woolsey shirt, linen warp, wool weft. Your mother spun both threads herself, and it scratches at the neck like it always does. Buckskin breeches gone stiff overnight. You have to bend them at the knee with your hands before they'll bend with your legs, and they crackle when they give. Wool stockings darned at both heels, and moccasins, because your one pair of proper shoes is being saved for winter proper, and moccasins are what everyone wears here anyway. And there is a saying about them you learned your first week in Kentucky. Moccasins are a decent way of going barefoot. When the ground is wet, your feet are wet. The ground is always wet. Your hunting shirt goes over everything. A long loose frock of the same linsey belted at the waist, and everything you need for the day lives in the folds of it or hangs from the belt. Knife in a leather sheath, handle worn to the shape of your grip. A twist of toe for cleaning the rifle. 2 corn dodgers from last night, hard as knuckles wrapped in a rag, and the rifle itself lifted down from its pegs over the door. 44 inches of barrel, curly maple stock, made by a German smith back in Virginia before you were born. It was your grandfather's. It is the most valuable thing your family owns, worth more than both cows together, and it comes down from the pegs every single morning, because in this country a man does not walk to his own cow pen without it, not because of Indians. That's what people back east always ask first, and the honest answer here, now in 1798, is that the raiding years are mostly over. The treaties came after fallen timbers 4 years back, and the war parties that burned stations and took children when your father was young have gone north of the Ohio, mostly. The old men still sit close to the door at meeting. Your mother still counts children with her eyes, without seeming to every hour of every day. No, you carry the rifle for the woods themselves. For the wolves you hear every second or third night singing to each other across the creek valley. For the panther that took a shoat from the Henson's pen in October and left nothing but a smear and one hoof. For bears in the corn. For meat, if meat offers itself. The rifle is not a weapon out here. It is a tool, like the axe, and you'd no more leave it behind than you'd plough with your bare hands. You lift the door bar, a length of oak as heavy as your little brother, set it against the wall and step out into the cold. The air hits you like creek water. Your breath comes out in ropes. The sky over the eastern ridge is the colour of a peach just starting to turn, and everything below it is still night. The black mass of the woods that surround your clearing on every side, closer than you'd like, always closer than you'd like. 10 acres your family has cleared. 10 acres of stumps and corn stubble and garden, an island of open sky, and around it, forest to the end of the world. When people back in Virginia asked your father how big the farm was, he said 10 acres cleared and 400 claimed. Claimed. That's the word for land you own on paper, and the trees still own in fact. Frost has furred everything. Every rail of the fence, every dead cornstalk, every blade of grass, each one wearing its little white pelt, and the frost creaks under your moccasins with a sound like tiny bones. Somewhere down the valley, far off, a wolf lets go one long falling howl, late for it, going home, and the sound runs a wire up your back the way it always does and always will. The cows have heard you. They're pressed against the pen rails, breathing steam, udders tight, and old Bet swings her head and bawls right in your face, and her breath is grass-sweet and hot and honestly, this time of morning, not unwelcome. You milk kneeling in the frozen mud, forehead against her flank, and her body is like leaning against a stove. Your hands are so cold that for the first minute you can barely close them, and then the rhythm warms them. Squeeze from the top finger down, alternate squeeze, and the milk goes hissing into the wooden piggin. Ring, ring, ring against the staves, and then softer. Shush, shush, as the bucket fills and froths. Bet stamps. Her tail, wet at the tip and cold as a whip, catches you across the ear. You say a word your mother doesn't allow in the cabin. Halfway through the second cow you hear the cabin door, and your little brother comes across the frost with the hog slop, hunched around the pail's weight, 8 years old and mad about being awake. His name is Eli. He has your mother's temper and your father's ears. Fire was near out, he says, accusing. Fire's fine. Ma said it was near out. Then Ma can milk this cow and I'll go stand by the fire she's so worried about. He grins despite himself and goes on to the hog pen, and the hogs hear the pail and set up a screaming like the world ending, which is the sound hogs make about everything. You can hear him talking to them, low and important. He has named all 4. Your father has told him twice not to name things you're going to eat. He names them anyway. That's the thing nobody puts in the letters back east when they write about Kentucky. They write about the land, and Lord, the land deserves it. Soil so deep and black that your father cried the first time he turned a furrow of it. Actually cried, standing in the field with the plough handles in his hands, though you've all agreed without speaking to remember it as sweat. They write about the game, the timber, the cane that fattens cattle all winter with no hay. They don't write that you will hear your own family's voices and almost no others, week upon week. That the nearest neighbour is 2 miles through the woods. That the nearest store is a day's ride. The nearest mill half a day. The nearest anything that could be called a town. Lexington, with its brick houses and its rope walks and its newspapers. 3 days there and back with a loaded horse. They don't write that when your sister sees a stranger riding up the creek trail. She runs inside, not from fear, but from wonder, to fix her hair. You carry the milk to the cabin, a full piggin in each hand, the bales cutting into your fingers, walking the careful flat-footed walk of a boy who has spilled milk before and heard about it after. The smell of the cabin meets you at the door, and it is a different cabin now. Wood smoke and corn mush bubbling, and the good animal smell of your family up and moving. Your mother is at the hearth. Your father is at the table with the whetstone, putting an edge on the felling axe. Long, slow strokes. Shick, shick, shick. The sound your whole childhood is set to. Creak, he says, meaning, how did it look? Is it up? Is it down? Didn't cross the field yet, frost's heavy. Henson's boy came by last evening while you were at the spring. He tests the edge against his thumbnail and the blade shaves a curl off the nail, and he nods at it. Corn husking at their place tomorrow evening. Whole creek's asked. Your sister Nancy drops a spoon. A husking. You keep your face still, because you are 15, and keeping your face still is most of what you do. But something in your chest lifts like a lid coming off a kettle. A husking means every family within 5 miles in one barn. It means fiddle music. It means girls. It means for one evening that the woods are not the only thing in the world. Tomorrow, your father says, reading you anyway, the way he reads weather. Today we've got the new ground. Eat. Breakfast is mush and milk, eaten fast and standing for you, sitting for the little ones. The mush is white corn, ground at Craig's mill 3 weeks ago, and it's starting to go musty at the bottom of the sack, and you can taste it. A grey note under the sweetness, and nobody mentions it, because mentioning it doesn't make more corn. The milk is still cow-warm. Your mother salts your bowl from the salt gourd, and she does it with 2 fingers, pinching, precise as a woman counting money, because that is exactly what she is doing. Salt is money here. Worse, salt is a journey. It doesn't come from a store, not for what a store charges. It comes from the licks, the salt springs where the ground itself weeps brine, and the buffalo wore roads to it 100 generations deep before any white man saw Kentucky. Twice a year your father and the Henson men go with pack horses and iron kettles, and camp at the lick for the better part of a week, boiling. 500 gallons of brine, boiled down over fires you feed day and night to make 1 bushel of salt. You went last spring. Your job was firewood, dawn to dark, and your hands cracked open across every knuckle from the axe and the heat and the brine. And when the cracks dried, they split fresh every morning with the first swing of the day, a bright, thin pain like a paper cut that goes to the bone. And you learned why every man at the lick had black seams on his hands, salt seams. You have them now too. They have never fully closed. Without that bushel, no meat keeps. Without meat keeping, winter is corn and prayer. So your mother pinches 2 fingers and puts the gourd back on the shelf like it's made of glass. Then the day begins in earnest, and the day is trees. The new ground is 3 acres on the slope above the creek, and your father means to have it in corn by spring, and between his intention and that corn stand may be 200 trees, some of them older than the name Kentucky. You don't cut them all. Nobody could. The giants. The white oaks 5 feet through. The tulip poplars that go up 60 feet before the first branch. Those you girdle. You take the axe and chop a ring around the trunk, through the bark, through the sapwood, a hand's width of wound all the way around, and then you leave the tree standing. It will not know it's dead until spring. It will stand there, grey and leafless, for years, while corn grows in its shade that is no longer shade. And one winter night in a windstorm it will come down with a sound like the end of the world, and you'll plough around the corpse for a decade. A field of standing dead trees, corn between them like green water between grey pilings. That's what a new Kentucky farm looks like. Nobody paints pictures of it. It works. The smaller trees, anything you can reasonably fell, you fell, and that is where your morning goes. You work down slope from your father, on a hickory maybe 1.5 feet through. The first swing is always the honest one. It tells you how the day will go. The axe bites. The shock runs up the helve into your palms and wrists and settles in your elbows, and a chip the size of your hand leaps out and lies on the frost, pale as bread. The smell comes right behind it. Cut hickory, green and sharp and almost sweet, a smell you will love your whole life without ever quite being able to say why. And then you are inside the work, and the work has a shape. Swing from the top of the notch, swing from the bottom, and the chips fly. And your breath finds the rhythm. Out with the blow, in on the backswing, and the cold stops mattering. And then the cold becomes its opposite, and you shed the hunting shirt, and steam rises off your forearms into the November air like you're something just taken off the fire. This sound of 2 axes in frosted woods carries a mile. Your father's, deeper, slower, chock, chock, yours quicker, and from across the creek valley, faint, a third, Henson, or Henson's oldest, at their own clearing. 3 axes, 3 miles of country. That's the whole morning's conversation, and it is a conversation. You can hear when your father stops to breathe. He can hear when your notch angle goes lazy. And once, when your hickory hangs up in a neighbouring beech instead of falling clean, you hear him stop entirely. That listening silence until it comes down. Because that's the thing about this work. It kills people. Not dramatically most of the time. Not the way people back east imagine. Wolves and war parties. A widowmaker. A dead limb shaken loose by the felling, dropping silent from 40 feet while you watch the trunk. A tree that kicks backward off the stump. An axe glancing off a knot and into a shin, and then the shin going red, then hot, then the streaks climbing toward the knee, and the nearest man who calls himself a doctor is at Danville and half of what he knows is wrong. Every family on this creek has its story. The Hensons buried a brother the first winter. A limb, snow, nobody heard him for an hour. Your father says the same 9 words at the start of every felling day, and he said them today, and you could say them in your sleep. Look up before you swing, and mind where I am. By the time the sun clears the ridge, 9 o'clock maybe, you tell time by ridge and shadow and stomach, you have 3 trees down and limbed, and your hands have gone through their whole daily journey. Cold, then warm, then hot, then blistered where the old calluses end, then past feeling anything but the axe. There is sweat frozen in your hair at the temples. When you finally stop and drink from the water gourd, your hands shake so that the gourd knocks against your teeth, and the water is so cold it hurts your chest going down, and it is the best thing you've ever tasted, and you thought the same thing yesterday, and you'll think it again tomorrow. You sit on the fresh stump, still exhaling its wet, sweet smell, the rings under you counting backward past your grandfather, past the first Englishman in Virginia, past everything. And you eat 1 corn dodger, and it takes real jaw work, and while you chew, you look at what you and your father have done. 3 trees, 200 to go. A season's work to make a field, a generation's work to make a farm, and around it all, patient as water, the forest which was here before and intends. You can feel it intending to be hereafter. Your father sits on his own stump 20 feet off, eating, looking at the same trees. Man at the mill told me, he says around his bread. There's parts of this state now where you can stand and see nothing but cleared land. Horizon to horizon, down around Lexington. You try to picture it and honestly cannot. Won't live to see it here, he says. He doesn't sound sad about it. He picks a crumb off his knee and eats it. You might. Then he stands and stretches his back with both fists in it, until it cracks like green wood, and picks up the axe. And that is the end of philosophy for today. Around midday your mother sends Nancy up the slope to fetch you, because there's an errand, and the errand is the mill sack problem, which is this. The corn is nearly out, the mill is half a day's round trip, and tomorrow is the husking, which means today is the only day. So you shoulder the rifle and you halter Duke, the plough horse 17 years old, wise and cynical, with a way of sighing through his nose when you put the pack saddle on that says he has seen all this before, and you load 2 bushel sacks of shelled corn across his back, and you set off down the creek trail toward Craig's Mill, 5 miles, alone. And this is the part of the day I most need you to understand, because this is the part that no letter East ever got right. You are 15 years old, and you're going to walk 5 miles through primeval forest, and 5 miles back, and in all 10 of those miles you may not see one single human being, and everyone considers this completely normal, because it is. This is what going anywhere means. There is no road, in any sense your cousins in Virginia would recognize. There is a trace, a horse-wide path worn by hooves and moccasins that ducks under grapevines and squeezes between trunks and drops down to cross the creek wherever the creek permits crossing. In summer, the canebrakes wall it in, cane 15 and 20 feet tall, so dense a dog has to back out, and you walk that green tunnel listening. Now, in November, the woods are open and grey and lit like the inside of a church, and you can see 100 yards through the trunks, and everything that lives here can see you. The trail sounds travel with you. Your own footsteps, soft in wet leaves, Duke's hooves, the creak of the pack saddle, his big peaceful breathing at your shoulder. A pileated woodpecker somewhere off left, hammering a dead poplar with a sound like someone knocking to be let out of a tree. Squirrels, always squirrels. The woods are absurd with them. This is a mast year, and the white oaks have buried the ground in acorns, and the squirrels have gone about half insane with wealth, bounding away in leaf showers, then stopping to swear at you from safe height. And under everything, everywhere, the creek, talking to itself. You watch the ground without knowing you're doing it. That's the schooling this country gives you, and it gives it fast. Deer sign, fresh, a doe, and a big one. Turkey scratch. The straddle print of a raccoon in creek mud like a small burglar's hand. And once, crossing a wet seep, pressed clean into the black muck, round as a plate, and fresh enough that the water is still seeping into it. A track with no claw marks. Cats walk with their claws in, dogs and wolves and bears out. Panther. You stop. Duke stops. Duke's ears go up and around like 2 hands cupped, and his nostrils open, and you stand in the grey woods with your thumb on the rifle's lock, not afraid exactly. A panther wants a shoat or a fawn, not a boy and a horse, 99 days of 100, but changed. The woods have been rearranged around that track. Every deadfall is now a shape. You listen until listening squeezes your skull. Nothing. Creek, woodpecker, squirrel. You walk on. You walk on because there is nothing else to do, and corn does not grind itself. But for the next mile your eyes never stop moving, and this exact state, this soft-footed, wide-eyed onwardness, is the natural resting condition of every soul in this country, and after 2.5 years it is simply how you are. You'll carry it the rest of your life. Old Kentucky men, it said, sit where they can see the door until the day they die. Craig's Mill announces itself long before you see it. First as a feeling in the ground, then a sound like heavy rain that never varies. And then you come around the bluff and there it is. The biggest built thing you've seen since summer. a log structure 2 stories tall astride the creek, with an overshot wheel 12 feet across turning slow and shining, water combing off the buckets in ropes and sheets, and inside the true sound, the one you feel in your teeth, 2 granite stones, each the weight of 6 men, one turning on the other, growling through corn. There are 3 horses tied at the rail. 3. It's practically a city. Elias Craig takes your sacks and hefts them with 1 arm each, which is his way of weighing them, and he is flowered white from hat to boots, eyebrows and all, like a man made of dough, and he shouts everything, 'cause 30 years beside those stones has taken most of his hearing. Tate's boy. Yes, sir, tolls the 8th same as ever. Eamers, 1 gallon of every 8, that's the mill's cut. No coin needs to change hands. Out here almost no coin ever does. You'll wait behind Widow Sutton's turn. Hear about the husking? Everyone has heard about the husking. That's the other thing a mill is. It is the newspaper. While the stones grind, you stand in the flour-fogged room, with 2 men you half know and 1 you don't, and in 3/4 of an hour of shouted talk you receive the entire news of the world, sorted by distance. Creek news, the husking, the panther. The stranger saw the same track, or one like it, up on the ridge, and now it's confirmed, now it's real, now every pen on the creek will be barred tight tonight. County news, court day at Danville turned into 3 fistfights and a horse race, same as every court day. And far news, months old, worn smooth by handling, the price of Kentucky tobacco at New Orleans, and whether the Spanish, who own New Orleans, will keep the river open to American boats, which matters here the way rain matters, because the Mississippi is the only door out of this country that money fits through. Everything Kentucky grows must float away south to be sold. And a rumour about a treaty, and a rumour about the French, and somebody's cousin's letter that says the whole matter is settled, and somebody else who says it isn't, and there being no way on earth to know. You take your meal home warm. That's a true thing people forget. Fresh ground corn comes off the stones warm as a loaf, and the sacks ride against your side going home, and the smell of it is enough to make your stomach speak out loud. You make the walk back faster, partly the sacks, partly the light, which is already leaning. November days are a purse with a hole in it, and partly, though you'd not say it out loud, the track by the seep, which you pass again, and which now has your own morning footprints beside it, and something about seeing the 2 together, the plate-round pad and your moccasin print, sits in your stomach the rest of the way home like a swallowed stone. The afternoon is chores in falling light, and chores here are not tidying. Every one of them is a small wall against something. You carry water from the spring, 4 trips, 2 piggins a trip, and the spring is 140 steps downslope from the cabin. You have counted, everyone counts, and it comes out of a limestone cleft cold enough to ache your wrist bones when you dip, and it never freezes and never fails, and it is the entire reason the cabin stands where it stands. Your father chose the spring first and the house second, the way every family here did. In Kentucky, you do not bring water to the house. You bring the house to the water. You split wood until the stack under the eave stands as tall as your mother, and your palms, already worked past complaint this morning, go through one more cycle of hot and numb. You fork corn fodder to the cows and check the pen rails, and then you check them again top to bottom, pushing on each one because of the track by the seep. And you find one rail grey and punky with rot, and you replace it in the last good light, fitting the new rail into the crossed corners, the wood cold and wet slick under your hands, hammering the stakes with the pole of the hatchet. each blow flat and loud against the dusk and answered faintly by its own echo off the ridge. Inside, the cabin has drawn itself in around the fire the way it does every evening. Your mother and Nancy have been at the loom and the small wheel through the afternoon. You can hear the loom before you reach the door, the shuttles slap and the beaters thump, 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 steady as a heart, the sound of your family being clothed. And now they're at supper. Little Eli is under everyone's feet, sorting his treasures on the hearth. Buckeyes, a flint he sure is an arrowhead, a snake rattle with 7 buttons that he shakes at his sisters until your mother confiscates it. Supper is what supper is in November on this creek. Fried mush and milk, boiled pumpkin, and, because tomorrow is the husking, and today is therefore nearly a feast day, the last of the smoked side meat, 1 thick slice each, fried till the edges go glass brittle, and the smell of it fills the cabin's whole single room, and everybody is very quiet in a very particular way while it cooks. Grace is short. Your father's graces are famous for it. Bless this food and this family, and he means both, and that's the end of it. And then, in the firelit hour after, this hour, right here, is the one I'd have you keep if you keep one. The cabin does its nightly work. Your father has a shoe of Eli's on the lass between his knees, pegging the sole tack, tack, each wooden peg driven and the excess pared with the knife. Your mother knits by firelight without once looking down at her hands. Her needles tick like a slow clock. She watches the fire and the needles go on without her. Nancy reads out loud because Nancy is the family's reader, and there are 3 printed things in this cabin: the Bible, an almanac 2 years old, and a dog-eared songbook. And tonight it's the almanac, and she reads the weather predictions for a year already gone, and everyone corrects them from memory. That's the game. And Eli falls asleep mid-laugh against your side, heavy and boneless as a shot goose, smelling of wood smoke and boy. The fire settles. Duke stamps once, out in the dark. Far off. Always far off. Please God, always far off. One wolf opens the night's business, and a second answers it. A long falling harmony that comes down the creek valley, and through the chinking cracks and into the room, and nobody remarks on it, and your mother's needles do not miss a tick, and that, if you want it in one image, is what living here does to people. The wilderness sings outside the wall, and the wall holds, and the knitting goes on. You bank the fire last thing. Your job, always your job. Raking the coals into a heap and burying them in ash like putting the day itself to bed, so that tomorrow's walnut-sized survivor will be waiting for you. You bar the door. You lie down in the trundle bed next to your brother's furnace of a body, and the cold comes to the edge of the blankets and waits there, and sleep takes you between one wolf note and the next. And then it's tomorrow, and tomorrow is the husking, and the whole day leans toward evening like a plank propped against a wall. The work still has to happen. Cows don't observe holidays, water doesn't walk uphill, but it happens fast and light, and by mid-afternoon your mother has the good cheese and a crock of honey wrapped in a basket, and Nancy has done something to her hair involving rags and suffering that began the night before, and your father has put on his one coat with buttons, and you've scrubbed your neck at the spring with soft soap that smells of ash and grease, and scoured your nails with sand, and the whole family walks the 2 miles to Henson's in the blue end of the afternoon, Eli riding Duke, everybody's breath making one travelling cloud. You hear the husking before you see it. That's the truth about this whole country. You hear everything before you see it. First the dogs. Then, under the dogs, a sound you have not heard since summer. Many human voices at once, laughing, overlapping, that surf sound of a crowd, and something in your chest rises toward it like a fish toward a hatch. Henson's yard is fire and people. Two great bonfires snapping sparks up into the dark, and between them, in the light, the corn, a mountain of it, unhusked, long as a cabin and shoulder high, every ear of the Henson's harvest hauled in and heaped for this one night. 40 people, maybe 50. You count faces without meaning to, the creek's whole scattered population gathered into one firelight, and you know every single one of them, and you've seen almost none of them for 6 weeks. Old men already installed on stumps by the fire, arguing about the Spanish and the river. Women streaming into the cabin with baskets, and the smell coming out of that cabin. Roast pork and honey and coffee, real coffee. Mrs. Henson has been hoarding it. Is a thing you could lean on. Captains are chosen. The pile is divided with a fence rail laid across its middle, and the race begins. 2 teams, one half of the mountain each, and the husking itself. Grip, rip, snap, and the bare gold ear flashes firelight as it flies to the crib pile. 40 pairs of hands doing it at speed, a sound like a hailstorm on shucks, and shouting, and the fiddler tuning up on the porch, and Eli somewhere in a herd of boys being told to get out of the pile, and the first red ear found. A red ear means a kiss, that's the law of huskings older than the state, and it's found by Sam Henson, who stands up with it over his head like a scalp, roaring, and the whole yard roars back, and you are laughing, everyone is laughing, and above the fires the sparks go up and up into a black sky rammed with stars, and for this one evening the woods around the clearing are just trees. You husk until your palms burn in a new place. The shucks rasp skin the axe never touches, and you drink sweet cider and eat until your ribs complain, and you dance one reel with the middle Henson girl. Badly, counted through it by her the whole way, her hand dry and warm and sure in your cracked one, and you would not trade the evening for Lexington entire. It's full dark and getting late when it stops being that kind of night. It's your mother who notices. Of course it's your mother. She's been talking with the women by the cabin door, and you see her head come up and turn, that counting look, the one that runs the yard tallying children without seeming to, and you see it stop and run again and stop. She crosses the yard to your father, and she doesn't hurry, and that not hurrying is the loudest thing in the whole loud yard. "Where's Eli?" The boys are found and questioned in about 40 seconds. A dozen of them shuck Dusty suddenly solemn. They'd been playing at hunters, out past the barn where the firelight ends. They'd been daresing each other toward the wood's edge. Tommy Henson, 7, starts to cry before he finishes his sentence, and his sentence is, "Eli said he heard the panther and he was going to see, and he told us to wait. He told them to wait maybe an hour ago." And here is the thing you need to understand about the next part, which is that nobody screams. What happens instead is worse than screaming in a way. It's faster. The fiddle stops mid-phrase. The husking pile is abandoned where it lies, and the whole frolic turns itself, inside 2 minutes, into the other thing it always was underneath. Because every gathering in this country is also dormant. A company. The men come to your father the way iron filings come to a lodestone. Torches are made out of the bonfire itself, split pine snatched from the woodpile and lit. Somebody has already brought out the horn. Which way'd he go exactly? Your father's voice, asking 7-year-old Tommy, is gentler than you have ever heard it in your life, and that gentleness scares you more than shouting would. Past the barn, toward the creek, toward the dark. The night takes you in whole. 10 steps past the firelight and the frolic is aglow at your back, and the cold closes over your head like water. You're in a line of men and torches moving through open woods, and the torchlight does an ugly thing to the forest, worse than plain dark. It makes the trees move. Every trunk swings its shadow around itself as you pass, the whole wood slowly turning like a crowd turning to look, and beyond the light's edge, 15 feet, no more, the blackness is total, and it is full of your own thoughts, and your thoughts tonight are one round pad print in black muck, no claws, and the water still seeping in. You're 15, and you know things you wish you did not. You know the creek is up from Tuesday's rain, up and fast and cold enough to kill a grown man in an hour and a boy in less. You know the sinkholes on this slope. This is limestone country. The ground here is rotten with caves. There are holes in these woods that a torch dropped in falls and dies before it hits anything. You know it is freezing, is already frozen, and Eli went out in his shirt. The men string out in a line 10 feet apart and move downslope toward the creek, and the calling begins. His name passed down the line and out into the dark over and over. Eli, Eli. And between calls, the horn, a long cow horn note, flat and huge, a sound made to travel, and you feel it go out through the woods for miles, and then everyone stops and listens, and the woods give back the creek and the wind and one owl and nothing. You want to run. Everything in your body is shouting run, run down the slope, run calling, and the man next to you in the line. Old Mr. Renfro, 60 if he's a day, who came into this country when it was Indian ground and a torch line like this one went out for somebody every season, puts one hand on your shoulder without even looking at you and says, slow is how you find, fast is how you miss. And you hate him for it, and he is right, and you walk. Your torch spits and flutters, pine smoke in your eyes, the frost leaves under your feet deafening, each step a crash. How did Eli's steps sound to the woods? Down the line, someone finds a small footprint in a mud seep, and the whole night tightens around it, and then it's Renfro who reads it and says it's Tommy's from this afternoon. Wrong direction, wrong size, and the night loosens, which is worse. They reach the creek. You hear it before the torchlight finds it, that full-throated cold water sound, and the line stops on the bank and torches go up high, and men look at the black water sliding past, and nobody says the thing, and everybody thinks the thing, and your father's face in the torchlight has gone somewhere you cannot follow. And then, and you will replay this instant at odd moments for the rest of your life, sharpening it, polishing it, the horn blows again, one long note, and in the silence after it, thin and far off to the left, downstream, comes a sound that is not creek and not owl. Everyone hears it. The whole line of men turns like one man. Again the horn, again the sound. Small, human, furious, crying. Not hurt crying, mad crying. The unmistakable sound of an 8-year-old who is freezing and terrified and above all other things embarrassed. He is 400 yards downstream in a canebrake, and getting to him takes 10 minutes that feel like a season. Torches ducking under the cane, the dead stalks clattering like dry bones, and then the light finds him. Eli Tate, wedged in the fork of a leaning sycamore 6 feet off the ground, white as a shirt, shaking so hard the branch shakes, and absolutely alive. He'd heard something. That part was true. He'd gone to see, and the dark had turned him around inside 100 yards. The dark out here turns grown men around. It has nothing to prove by turning a boy. And he'd walked the wrong way with total confidence. the way the lost always do. And then something had moved in the cane, something real or something dark made, and he had gone up the sycamore the way squirrels go up, and once up, could not make himself come down. He has been in that tree, in his shirt, in the freezing dark, listening to the cane rattle for the better part of an hour. Your father lifts him out of the fork, and Eli's arms go round his neck, and your father holds him and says nothing at all. Nothing. Just stands in the torchlight with his eyes shut, and the men around them look off into the cane with great sudden interest. Everyone, because there are things a man is owed privacy for, even standing in a crowd. And then Renfro drapes his own coat over the boy, and somebody laughs the first laugh, shaky, but a laugh, and says that tree'll be called Eli's roost till the end of time, and the horn blows the found note 3 shorts, and far up the slope you hear the frolic answer it, with a sound like the whole world exhaling. You walk back up through the woods behind your father, carrying 2 dead torches and Renfro's spare, and your legs are shaking now that they're allowed to, and the fires of Henson's yard come up through the trees like sunrise moved to midnight. Eli is fed, wrapped, scolded, kissed, scolded again, and installed by the fire like a small returning hero. And within half an hour he is telling the other boys about the panther he definitely heard. Definitely, and the size of it growing with each telling, and your mother lets him, because there will be time for the other conversation, and it will be had, but not tonight. The fiddle starts back up, softer now. The husking pile gets finished by lantern light, the last ears snapped and flung, and the night ends the way these nights end, with families sorting themselves out of the crowd, and lanterns and torches stringing away from the fires in every direction like sparks walking home. Your family walks home under a moon just risen, Eli asleep on Duke's back with your father's hand flat on his spine the whole 2 miles, and nobody talks, and the woods you walk through are the same woods that had your brother 2 hours ago, and they look the same as they always look, silver and black and older than names, and you understand something on that walk that you'll never fully find words for, which is that this country does not hate you. That would almost be easier. It simply does not notice you. The creek that would have drowned Eli waters your corn. The dark that swallowed him banks your fire. The forest is not your enemy. It's just bigger than you, in every direction, all the time, and it forgets you the instant you stop moving, and living here means making it remember. 1 clearing, 1 fence rail, 1 bell on a cow, 1 name on a sycamore tree. Eli's roost. That's how a country gets its names. Every strange name on a Kentucky map, Defeated Creek, Troublesome, Kingdom Come, is a night like this one that somebody walked home from, or didn't. The morning after, the husking arrives exactly on schedule, without sympathy, and it arrives with rain. You hear it before you're awake, that change in the roof's voice, the shakes overhead going from silence to a soft crowded drumming, and you lie there for 1 stolen minute in the warm hollow of the bed, listening to it, doing the farmer's arithmetic that you have somehow, without ever being taught it, learned to do before your eyes are open. Rain in November means the creek comes up. Creek up means no crossing to the far wood lot. It means the low trail to Henson's turns to soup. It means the cows stand miserable and steaming, and the firewood you split yesterday is the only dry firewood in the world, and it means, above everything, mud. I want to take a minute on mud, because you cannot understand this country without it. There are no paved surfaces in your entire universe. None. The nearest brick is in Lexington. the nearest cobblestone might as well be in London. Every path, every yard, every pen, every floor of every outbuilding is dirt, and for 5 months of the year that dirt is some form of wet. The yard between cabin and cow pen is churned to a black pudding that pulls at your moccasins with a sound like a cook working dough, schlup, schlup, and twice a week it pulls one clean off your foot and you stand there stork-like, cursing quietly, hopping, fishing for it. The mud gets into everything because it is everything. It dries in grey crusts on your leggings, and your mother scrapes it off the puncheons with a hoe, indoors. And all winter the space around the door is a battlefield trench, and there is nothing to be done about any of it, ever, except what you do about everything here. You keep moving. The rain also means indoor work, and indoor work today means the hominy block, which means your arms already know how tomorrow morning is going to feel. The hominy block stands under the eave by the door, a section of gum log, thigh high, its top burned and scraped out into a bowl over many patient evenings. You did most of the scraping, a coal set in the wood, blown bright, scraped, another coal, that whole first autumn. Into the bowl goes shelled corn. Above it hangs the pestle, an iron-shod wooden maul as long as your leg, slung from the springy tip of a bent sapling so the sapling does half the lifting for you. And then you pound. That's the work entire. You pound. Grab, pull down, let rise, pull down. And the block answers with a deep wooden pom that you feel through the soles of your feet. Pom, pom, steady as a slow drum. And the corn cracks and the hulls loosen, and the meal begins. There's a rhythm you drop into after the first 100 strokes where your body carries it, and your mind wanders loose, and every homestead on this creek makes this same sound so regularly that people navigate by it. Travellers in this country say you hear a farm before you see it, and what you hear is this. The hominy block, somebody's axe, a dog, a bell. That bell, listen, is your own cowbell, out in the grey rain, clonking mournfully with each toss of Bet's wet head. And that sound matters more than you'd think, because when the cows are turned out to browse the woods in better weather, that bell is the only way on God's earth to find them again. Everyone on the creek knows every bell by ear. A bell going wrong, fast, panicked, or worst of all, stopped, is a message, and everyone can read it. Nancy takes a turn at the pestle when your shoulders give out, and she pounds better than you do, more even, because Nancy does everything more even. And while she pounds, you sit under the eave out of the rain, and work grease into your moccasins and into the salt cracks of your knuckles. Tallow and beeswax warmed by the fire, and the first press of your thumb into each split knuckle stings, then soothes. That double sensation. Small pain paying for small relief. That is somehow the signature feeling of this entire life. And your mother, passing behind you into the rain with her shawl over her head to see to the hens, stops 1 second, looks at your hands and says, "You'll have your grandfather's hands." She doesn't say it's sad. She says it the way you'd read a fact out of the almanac. Her father's hands, you remember them, brown, cracked, enormous, gentle. It is, you understand slowly over years the way she gives compliments. The rain quits by noon, the sky lifts to a high scrubbed grey, and your father comes in from the crib with news that has been coming for 3 days the way weather comes. Tomorrow, if it holds, is hog killing. And your stomach does the 2 things at once that it always does at those words, because hog killing is the worst work of the year and the best food of the year, and there is no untangling them. It holds, and the next morning comes on cold and still, killing weather, your father calls it. Cold enough to chill the meat, not so cold your hands quit. And the Hensons arrive at grey dawn, all of them, the men with knives rolled in leather and Mrs. Henson with her own gambrel sticks, because hog killing, like house raising, like husking, like everything real in this country, is not done by a family. It's done by a neighbourhood. Yours today, theirs Thursday. Nobody keeps accounts. Everybody keeps accounts. Both of those are true, and everyone understands exactly how. I'll spare you the first 10 minutes, and so will your memory mostly. It is loud and violent and fast, and your father is good at it, which is its own mercy. What follows is a full day of work so absorbing that the cold stops existing. The scalding barrel steams like a spring in hell, tilted against a mound of earth, water heated with stones from a roaring fire. The hogs are dipped and turned with hooks, and then everyone crowds in and scrapes, scraping bristles with knives and hoe blades, and the sound of it, a dozen blades rasping wet hide, is a sound you will smell. Yes, smell. The senses run together on this day. Hot water and bristle and blood and wood smoke braided into one thing. For the rest of your life, every time you hear metal scrape. By afternoon, the work turns fine. The carcasses hang from the gambrels and the cutting starts. And this is where you watch old Renfro, who has come too, because Renfro cutting up a hog is like your father laying a fire, or your mother throwing the shuttle. A lifetime, visible in two hands. Hams, shoulders, middlings for bacon. The leaf lard peeled out in sheets, nothing lost, and I am telling you nothing. The head to souse, the feet to pickle, the guts turned and scraped and washed at the creek by the women in the coldest work of the whole cold day for sausage casings, the bladders blown up and tied off and given to the boys for balls, and Eli and Tommy Henson are immediately away across the yard, playing a game with no rules, and one rule, which is possession. The fresh meat that can't keep is the night's feast, and the smell of frying tenderloin rolls out of the cabin by dark and folds the whole yard in, and everyone eats standing, greasy to the wrists, tired in the way that is almost the same as happy. And the salt, this is where the salt goes. This is what the week at the lick was for. The salt comes out by the wooden bowlful, and your father and Renfro rub down the hams and shoulders on the meat bench by lantern light, working the salt into every face of the meat with their bare cracked hands, pressing, packing, turning, and the brine bites into every split knuckle at the table, and nobody so much as hisses. And the packed meat goes down in layers in the powdering tub, and what you are watching, though nobody calls it that, is your family's winter being sealed against the future, pound by pound, by hand. 6 weeks in the salt. Then the smokehouse, and green hickory smouldering under the hung meat for days on end, and that low, sweet smoke leaking out of every crack of the little log hut like the building itself is breathing, which, in a way that matters, it is. Eli does not name anything all day. He watches nearly all of it, though, from various distances gravely. That evening on the walk to the spring, he asks you whether it hurts them, and you tell him the truth, which is quick, done right, and that doing it right is the whole job, and he thinks about that for about 20 steps, and then asks if he can carry the lantern, and that is the end of it. And that is also, though neither of you knows to call it this, how a boy is raised out here, question by question, on the way to the spring. The Sunday after the hog killing brings the preacher. You know he's coming the way you know everything is coming. because the mill said so, and his coming reorganizes the week around itself, because a preacher on this creek is not a weekly matter. He is a circuit rider, one man to a circuit of 200 miles and better, preaching in cabins and yards and under trees, 4 weeks around and back again, in all weathers, on a horse that knows the fords better than he does. There's a saying already in 1798, and you've heard grown men say it looking out at freezing rain. Nothing out today but crows and Methodist preachers. This one is called Brother Ogden, and he is 26 years old and looks 46, weathered down to leather and bone. And he arrives at Renfro's. Meeting is at Renfro's this round, the biggest cabin on the creek, with everything he owns in 2 saddlebags, a Bible, a hymn book, a change of linen, and a tin cup. The whole creek comes. Of course the whole creek comes. Some of it comes for God, all of it comes for the gathering, and no one sees any contradiction there, and honestly neither do I. Renfro's cabin holds the women and the old and the small packed to the walls, and the men and boys stand in the yard at the open door in their coats, breath steaming, and Brother Ogden preaches from just inside the doorway so that his voice serves both rooms, the indoors one and the enormous outdoors one, and whatever you believe or don't 200 years from now wrapped warm in your bed. Understand what a voice is worth in a country this quiet. You have heard, in the last 6 weeks, perhaps a dozen human beings speak. Now, a trained voice, a big weathered instrument of a voice, rolls out over 60 bowed heads and out past them into the bare trees, rising and falling, gathering speed and easing off, and when the line singing starts, the preacher chants each line, and the people sing it back, because there are 3 hymn books in the whole congregation, and half the yard can't read anyway. The sound that 60 scattered lonesome people make, singing one line at a time in the cold, open air, will stand your arms up in gooseflesh, and it does, and you sing. And your father beside you sings low and off the note and entirely without embarrassment, and up the ridge a crow answers the whole proceeding with its own opinion, and nobody laughs, and everybody a little bit smiles. Afterward there is the other service, the one nobody calls a service, the yard standing hour. Marriages get arranged in outline in that hour, landlines get argued, a dispute about a strayed hog that has been quietly poisoning relations between 2 families for a month gets settled in 4 sentences with the preacher standing casually nearby like a fence post that can testify. Brother Ogden baptizes the Sutton's new baby, writes 2 dates in 2 family Bibles in a careful round hand, for on this creek he is the recording angel, the only continuity there is. Half the marriages he solemnized the courtship of 4 weeks at a time, and then he eats an enormous dinner at Renfro's table, because feeding the preacher is a competition the women hold with themselves, and by 2 o'clock he's on his horse again, headed for a cabin 20 miles northwest, and the creek watches him go up the trace and out of sight, and the week closes back over the place where he was like water. And then it is winter, and the winter is its own country, and I'll walk you into it slowly because it comes on slowly, and then all at once. First frost hardens to first freeze. The mud, small mercies, sets like a bad road's idea of pavement, every hoof print and wheel rut locked in iron, and turns an ankle if you walk it careless. The creek grows its ice ledges, creeping toward each other from both banks night by night, and the water talks under the ice with a swallowed private sound. The trees crack in the hard nights. That's a true thing, you hear it, a report off in the dark woods like a rifle, sap freezing and splitting the grain. And the first time you heard it, Your first winter, you came up out of bed with your heart slamming, and now you don't even turn over. The work turns inward, and the work turns to hands, shelling corn by the fire, night upon night, the whole family in a circle round a growing pile, thumbs against the cob spiral, and the kernels rattle into the wooden trough, and your thumbs were shiny and then raw, and then, by January, armoured, mending harness with an awl and waxed thread. The leather cold stiff until it's worked soft. The good smell of neat's foot oil. Your mother and Nancy at the loom while the light lasts and knitting after it's gone, and the whole clothing of the family walking this treadmill continuously. Wool from the sheep at Henson's traded for cheese, carded by the little ones with handcards, spun on the great wheel. Nancy walking miles a day back and forth beside that wheel. The hum of it rising and falling like weather, dyed with walnut hulls in the iron kettle, woven, cut, sewn. When your cousins in Virginia complain in a letter, which arrives in March, about the price of imported cloth, your mother reads it aloud with an expression that never changes, and everyone understands the joke without one word said. You run a trapline that winter, your first, with your father's blessing and Renfro's instruction. A dozen sets along 2 miles of creek for mink and muskrat and hope of hopes, otter. Up before the fire, out in the blue-black cold with your breath freezing on your collar, checking each set. And this is the wilderness's other face turned toward you, the ledger side, because furs are money, real money, nearly the only kind this country has. A prime mink skin is worth more than a bushel of corn. Come spring, your little bundle of pelts will ride to the store at Danville and turn into the things a homestead cannot make. A new axe head, needles, a paper of pins, powder and lead, cash money, the coins themselves. You could count the times you've held any on both hands. Spanish dollars, cut into halves and quarters and bits like a pie when change is needed, because there is no smaller coin to be had. This whole country runs on barter, book debt, and beaver, and it runs. And the wolves come nearer in the hard weeks. That's not a story, it's just January. Deep snow moves the deer move the wolves, and there are nights when the singing is not down the valley but on the ridge, close enough that you can hear the voices separate from each other. 4, 5, 6. And Duke turns circles in the pen, and your father stands at the cracked open door with the rifle for a while, not because he expects to use it, but the way you'd stand at a window watching a storm. The county pays a bounty on wolf scalps, and every man on the creek talks about it, and mostly the wolves are smoke. Heard always, seen almost never. In your entire life here you've seen exactly one, crossing the frozen creek at dusk, unhurried, glancing at you once with no more alarm than you'd give a fence post, and gone. You dream about it still. Not badly. It's just there sometimes. Crossing, glancing, gone. It's on one of those deep winter evenings, snow ticking at the door, that the road comes back. It happens the way it always happens, sideways. Nancy is carding wool and asks, out of nowhere, whether the tavern at the crab orchard is still standing, the one where the woman gave her the honey. Nancy was 12 on the road and remembers it in feasts and kindnesses. And your mother says she supposes it is, and your father says nothing, and Eli, who was 5 and remembers almost none of it, and is furious about that, demands the road again, tell the road, and so, because the fire is good and the corn is shelled and the wind has the door, your family tells itself, one more time, the story of how it got here. and I'll tell it to you the way it comes back to you, sitting on the floor with your spine against the bed frame, and the fire mapping everyone's faces because you were 12 going on 13 and you remember all of it. You remember leaving, the auction of everything that couldn't walk or ride, your grandmother's chest of drawers going to a neighbour for 11 shillings, and your mother's face while it went. You remember the party forming up at the blockhouse. Nobody travelled the wilderness road alone. You waited until you were 15, 20 families strong, rifles counted out loud, and the road itself, which was not a road. 200 miles of it, a horse path through the mountains that Boone's axeman marked when your father was a boy. Mud to the girth, ledges where the pack horses had to be steadied by hand, laurel thickets dark at noon. You walked. Everyone walked who could walk. The horses were for flour and bedding and the ones who couldn't. You wore out your shoes in the first week and learned moccasins the hard way, and you drove the 2 cows the whole 200 miles, you and your switch, and you can still, this minute on this floor, feel the exact ache of it climbing the back of your legs. You remember Cumberland Gap in the rain, that notch in the wall of the world, the white ribbon of path going up into cloud, and the whole line of your party bent under it, and your father stopping at the top, the only rest he permitted himself in an 18-mile day. To stand a moment where the water on one side runs back to Virginia, and on the other runs down to Kentucky, and saying nothing, and walking on. You remember the graves by the trail side, some marked, most just mounded from the bad years, the years the road earned its other name, and the way the grown-ups' voices dropped for a mile after each one, and the night camps drawn in tight with the fires built big, and the man hired as pilot telling stories at those fires that you were sent to bed in the middle of, on purpose, and heard the ends of anyway, lying rigid in the dark. And you remember the day the mountains let you go. The road coming down at last out of the laurel and the rock into open, rolling, unbelievable country. The crab-apple in bloom, the clover to the horse's knees, cane along the waters, the land lying there exactly as green as every liar back east had sworn it was, so that the whole footsore party stopped on a rise and just looked, and one man took off his hat, and nobody laughed at him. Your mother, walking beside you with the seed-corn sack where it had ridden for 200 miles at her own saddle, under her own eye, said quietly to the country itself, "Well then," and that was all, and that was everything, and you have heard her say well then 1,000 times since about 1,000 smaller things, and every single time some part of you is standing on that rise. Eli falls asleep before the story ends, as he always does, mid-road, safe in the middle of the journey, and your father carries him to bed, and the wind takes its turn at the door, and the fire is banked, and that night you dream, not of wolves, but of walking, that long, rocking, endless walk, and wake with your legs tired, and lie there a moment astonished at the flat, still, miraculous fact of a bed that stays where it's put. Then February gives you the fright, the real one, the one this whole life keeps in its pocket. Eli takes a fever. It starts as nothing. Everything out here starts as nothing. He's dull at supper, leaves half his mush, and your mother's hand goes to his forehead in the middle of her own sentence and stops, and her sentence stops, and the cabin's temperature changes without the fire doing anything at all. By midnight, he's burning. You know because you're beside him, and the trundle bed has become a hearth of its own, wrong heat, dry heat, and he mutters and turns and kicks the quilts, and then shakes with chills under 3 of them, and your mother is up, and then everyone is up, or lying, still pretending not to be. which is the same thing. And here is what you must understand about being sick on Clear Creek in 1798. There is no one to send for. Or rather, there is. And the sending is the whole problem. The nearest man who bleeds and doses for a living is at Danville, most of a day's hard ride in good weather. And this is February, and half of what he'd do when he got here, history will spend the next century learning, would be worse than nothing. So what happens instead is what always happens. The medicine this country actually runs on, which is women. Your mother's medicine chest is the loft, the garden, and her memory. Dried boneset hangs in bunches from the loft rafters beside the seed corn. Boneset for fevers, the bitterest thing God ever grew, and she steeps it, and Eli fights the cup and drinks it and gags and drinks. Sage tea, onions roasted soft in the ashes, split, bound to the soles of his feet in a rag, which draws the fever down. Everyone knows it draws the fever down, and whether it does or not, his feet are warm and his mother's hands are on him every quarter hour, and I will not tell you that counts for nothing. And when the fever climbs anyway on the second night, pass muttering into a glassy silence that is far worse than the muttering. Your father puts on everything he owns and takes a pine torch and walks. Walks, because a horse can't be trusted on the iron-rutted trail in the dark. The 2 miles to Henson's, and Mrs. Henson puts on everything she owns and walks back with him, because Mrs. Henson has borne 9 and buried 3, and there is no fever on this creek she hasn't sat with, and out here that is what a doctor is. The 2 women work in the fire glow with their sleeves pinned back and their voices at that pitch that doesn't wake a sleeping man in the same room. Cold cloths, wrung and turned and wrung. Nancy runs the water, the spring path in the black cold, over and over, 140 steps down, 140 up, ice in the bucket's rim by the time she reaches the door. You keep the fire, it's what you have. You keep it high and even, and you split kindling on the hearthstone at 3 a.m. with small careful blows, quiet as splitting can be made, because it is the one thing in the world you can control the size of. And you pray in the unpracticed, bargaining way of 15. With your forehead against your fists, and around you the cabin does the thing this whole life has been teaching you it does. It holds. Not because the walls are thick, because everyone in it, and half the creek beyond it, is holding it up. The fever breaks on the 4th morning. That's how these things mostly went, is the truth of it. Not medicine, but a body young enough and fed enough fighting through, while everyone around it held the ground. You're at the hearth when it happens, grey light in the door cracks, and behind you Eli says, in a voice like a rusty gate, that he's hungry, and the sound your mother makes is not a word, and you will remember it all your life. Mrs. Henson stays through breakfast, eats like a soldier, refuses everything offered her twice, and accepts a cheese on the 3rd offer as the rules require, and walks home in the risen sun. And that afternoon, your father sits at the table and writes in the family Bible. He doesn't write the fever, that's not what the Bible page is for. He just sits a long time with the book open at the page of names and dates, all of them so far, thank God, only births, and reads it, and closes it, and goes out to the woodlot and fells by himself, until dark. Eli is peevish and glorious for a week, waited on, and knowing it, and the cabin's joy at his peevishness is a thing you can warm your hands at. And then he is simply Eli again, out with the hog pail, talking to animals he is no longer allowed to name, and the household closes back over the fright like the creak over a thrown stone. But something stays with you. You catch yourself. in the weeks after, listening to his breathing at night the way your mother counts children in a yard, and you understand that you have crossed some line, that some part of the keeping of this family has quietly become yours and will never go back, and that this is neither burden nor honour but simply the next size of your life, arriving on schedule, the way the seasons do. And the season that arrives next is the one this whole year has been leaning toward. Spring, and with spring, the corn. It comes in increments you feel before you see. A smell in the wind off the south slope, black and sweet, the ground itself waking, the creek loud with snowmelt, brown and pushy, carrying whole trees past like matchsticks and reminding everyone what it is. Sugar time first. A frantic, wonderful 2 weeks when the maples run, and every kettle on the creek boils sap over fires in the bare woods. 40 gallons of sap to 1 of syrup, and you and Eli haul the sap buckets on a neck yoke until your shoulders are grooved and the woods at night are dotted with fire glow, and the smell of the whole valley is warm sugar, and everyone's temper is better than at any other time of year, and nobody pretends otherwise. Then the ploughing. Duke leaning into the collar, the plough point shearing through the sod of last year's field, with a sound like tearing canvas, and the furrow rolling off the mouldboard black and glistening, curling like something alive, and the smell of it, that smell your father wept at, and now you know, now you've earned the knowing, rising off the opened ground into the April air. Blackbirds walk the furrows behind you like little landlords. Your hands take the plough handles jolt and buck all day, every stone and root arriving directly into your wrist bones, and by evening your arms hum as if you'd been ringing bells. And then, on a warm May morning, when the oak leaves are the size of a squirrel's ear, that's the rule, that's how you know. The country itself is the almanac. Your whole family walks the new field together and plants. Your father marks the rows. Your mother and Nancy drop the seed, 4 kernels to the hill, 1 for the blackbird, 1 for the crow, 1 for the cutworm, and 1 to grow. You learned the rhyme before you learned your letters. You and Eli come behind with hoes, covering, tamping each hill once with the flat of the blade. Pat, a full day of bending measured out in those small pats, thousands of them, and by evening your back has opinions and the field lies smooth and secret. All that summer folded invisibly into it, and you stand at the field edge in the long light with the hoe on your shoulder, and it occurs to you, simply, without ceremony, between one thought and the next, that some of the seed in that ground descends straight from the sack your mother would not let anyone eat on the wilderness road. Hungry as that road made you, she carried next year through the mountains, and the year after that, and this one. And here it is in the ground of a state that didn't exist when she was born, waiting for rain. You never tell her you thought it, but you carry water up from the spring for her that evening without being asked. Both piggins, and she looks at you 1 beat longer than usual, and that is the entire conversation, and it is enough. Before the summer, though, in that raw window of March, when the sap work is done and the ploughing hasn't started, comes the journey, and the journey is Danville. And Danville is the farthest you've been from the cabin since you arrived in this country. Your father takes you because of the furs. They're yours. Your winter, your frozen dawns, your 2 miles of creek, a bundle of mink and muskrat, and 1 glorious dark otter, combed and stretched and dried, light as a rumour and worth more than anything you've ever owned. And he says a man ought to trade his own catch, and doesn't look at you when he says the word man, and you don't look at him either, and Duke carries the packs. It's a long day's ride and walk, ride and tie, one riding ahead a mile and tying Duke and walking on while the other walks up and rides past. The whole poor man's arithmetic of 1 horse and 2 people. And it works. It's worked for centuries. And the trace becomes a track. And the track becomes unmistakably a road. Wide enough for wagons, mud churned by wheels, and wheels mean the world is thickening around you. You start passing people. That's the thing you notice first and can't stop noticing. People, strangers, 1 and 2 an hour, then more. A man driving hogs, a family flitting west with everything they own roped on 2 horses and a cow, exactly the way your family came. And the small boy on top of the load stares at you as he passes the way. You know you once stared, out of that moving nest of bedding, at every settled soul you passed, thinking, they live here, they're already home, and then Danville. And I need you to be careful here, because the temptation 200 years on is to smile. Don't smile. Come into it the way Samuel Tate comes into it. You crest the last rise and there below is more building than you have seen in 3 years. Streets, plural, streets, crossing each other on purpose. And along them may be 100 houses, and some of those houses are frame, sawn lumber, painted, and 2 are brick, real brick, red as a cardinal against the mud, and there is a courthouse with glass windows, 12 panes over 12, throwing the March sun back at you, and you have not seen window glass since Virginia, and had honestly forgotten the way it flashes. The town roars. It's court day. Your father timed it so. Court day is market day is everything day. And the streets are a slow flood of horses, wagons, hogs, hemp bales, men in good coats and men in hunting shirts, and the sound of it all runs together into that crowd surf you last heard at the husking, but doubled, trebled, constant, and under it, from the edge of town, a blacksmith hammer keeping time like the place has a heart. You smell it before you're in it. Wood smoke and horse and mud, yes, those are the smells of your whole life. But braided through them, wonders, fresh sawn pine from a lumber yard, tan bark sour and rich from the tan yard down the branch, somebody's tavern kitchen roasting meat you didn't raise, and through the open door of the store, a smell you stop dead in the street to take in, and your father walks 2 steps on and waits without comment. Coffee, dye, leather, spice, calico, the store smell. There has never been a boy from a backwoods creek who forgot the first lungful of it. The store is dim and dense as a chest of drawers built the size of a barn, and everything in it came up from New Orleans by keelboat against the current, or over the mountains on a wagon, and every price says so. The storekeeper turns your furs to the window light 1 by 1, blows the fur backward against the grain to read the underfur, names a figure. Your father, beside you, becomes a fence post. Present, silent, entirely yours to lean on and no help at all, because this is the trade of your own catch. And so it's you who hears yourself say, in a voice that mostly doesn't crack, that the otter alone is worth that. The storekeeper looks at you for the first time as a party to the conversation. It goes back and forth twice more. You land somewhere that makes his face show nothing and your father's face show nothing, which, you understand the language of nothing by now, means you did fine. And then comes the part you have carried the winter's cold for. Powder and lead, first, always first. A new axe head, needles, pins, a paper of them, absurdly precious, your mother's one standing request. And then, with what remains, and you count it in bits and half-bits of cut silver twice, the things you never told anyone you meant to buy. A printed book Second-hand, its cover gone soft as cloth, for Nancy, because Nancy has read the almanac to rags, a jackknife with a bone handle for Eli, who will lose it within the year and mourn it for 2. And for your mother a paper of real tea, and for your father nothing, because your father would only make you take it back, and instead you pay yourself, out of your own fur money, for the sack of coffee beans he's been pricing with his eyes and calling foolishness with his mouth for 3 years. He says it's foolishness. He carries it out of the store himself. You eat dinner standing in the courthouse yard, bread and cheese from home, and you watch court day happen around you. The lawyers on the steps in their good black coats talking law and land. Land, always land. This whole state is a lawsuit. Everyone says so. The old surveys crossing each other like blind men's fences, shingled claims 3 deep on the same ground, and men who fought the wilderness 20 years for a farm now fighting a paper war for it in there behind the 12-pane windows, and some losing. Outside, a horse raced down the full length of the street that materializes out of 2 men's argument in the time it takes to clear the wagons, and the whole town betting in tobacco and knives. A fistfight behind the tavern, conducted and concluded and made up over a shared jug inside of a quarter hour. A man on a stump reading a Lexington newspaper out loud to 30 listeners. News of Congress, news of France, 3 months stale and brand new. And you stand at the edge of that crowd and listen to the wide world arrive in Kentucky the way water arrives at the end of a long ditch. Slow, muddy, and wanted. You sleep that night in the loft of a tavern with 11 strangers on a floor that smells of every traveller since statehood. 4 to a bed and the floor for the latecomers, and you and your father are latecomers, and you lie there in the dark listening to 11 kinds of snoring, and one man talking in his sleep in what your father in the morning says was German. And through the actual window under the actual eave comes the sound of the town at night. A dog, a door, a fiddle somewhere, late voices. A whole town, breathing. You think, some people hear this every night of their lives. You try to decide whether you envy them. You are still deciding when sleep takes you. And riding home the next day, down the road that becomes the track that becomes the trace, the country closing green-grey around you mile by mile, until the last 2 hours you meet no one at all, and the silence comes back like deep water. Riding home, you find the answer has decided itself, somewhere back along the way, without consulting you. Because when you come down the last slope in the failing light, and the dogs start up, and the cabin door opens and spills fireglow and Eli into the yard, and the smell of your own wood smoke reaches you, your smoke, your trees, your one-lit window in 15 miles of dark, something in your chest turns over like a key. Danville was a wonder. You'll go again, and gladly. But this is the place that knows your bell. One Sunday in June, with the corn up to your knee, and the whole green year running, your father does a thing he does maybe 4 times a year. He takes the morning off and takes you up the knob. The knob is the high cone of a hill behind your claim, a half-hour's climb through open oak woods, steep enough at the top that you use your hands, limestone ledges furred with grey lichen that crumbles like old bread under your fingers, and then you come out on the bald crown of it, into wind, and the whole country lays itself down at your feet. You can see, on a clear June morning like this one, 15 miles, maybe 20, and what you see, first and last, and mostly, is trees, an ocean of them, 100 greens deep, rolling ridge behind ridge to the edge of sight, riding the land's long swells, parted only where the creeks run. You can trace every creek by its line of pale sycamores, white as bone, winding through the green. And in all that ocean you can count the clearings. You literally count them, the way you'd count boats. Your own, a tan patch, the cabin a brown crumb, a thread of smoke standing off the chimney straight as a plumb line in the still air. The Henson's 2 miles north, its own thread of smoke. Renfrew's barely, a paleness. Down the far valley, the gap in the trees where the mill is. 5, 6, 7 human marks, and then nothing. Distance. Blue. The world. 20 years ago, your father says. He's breathing hard from the climb and he sits on the ledge with his forearms on his knees. There wasn't one. Not one fire in all this you could see from here, unless it was a hunting camp. My father's generation talked about Kentucky like men talk about the moon. The wind pushes at you both. A red-tailed hawk hangs off the knob at eye level, close enough to see it tilt its head, ride in the updraft without one wing beat, and below it and below you the whole shaggy country breathes. And your boy, your father says, or his boy, will stand up here and count farms till he loses count. And he won't believe it looked like this. You'll tell him, and he won't believe you. He looks at it while. The smoke, the trees, the distance. So look at it good. And you do. You stand on the knob in the wind at 15 years old and you look at it good, and you don't know. How could you? That he's right in every particular. That you will stand on this exact rock at 70 and count 60 farms and a turnpike and a church steeple, and describe this morning to a grandson who politely does not believe you. You just know that the wind is cold and the country is endless and the smoke standing off your own chimney. That one brown crumb of a cabin with everyone you love in the world inside it or near it is the realest thing in all 20 miles. Then you climb down, because the cows don't care about views, and the summer takes you. And the summer is work, with the collar open. Hoeing the corn through June until your dreams arose, the smell of hot green leaves and turned dirt, drinking at the spring straight from the dipper gourd, water so cold on a 90-degree afternoon it makes your back teeth sing. Wild strawberries in the old deadening, and then blackberries in walls of briar, and Eli purple to the elbows, squirrels raiding the roasting ears in armies, and you and the rifle standing guard at the field edge in the gold evenings, and squirrel and dumplings so often that Nancy declares a protest which is unanimously overruled. Thunderstorms that come over the western ridge like something out of scripture. The whole sky green-black. The trees showing the pale undersides of their leaves, and everyone running. For the stock, for the tools, for the loose shakes on the smokehouse roof. And then rain so hard and thick you can't see the fence. And then, an hour later, sun, and the whole valley steaming like a kettle, and the corn, you would swear it on the book, visibly taller, and the corn is the year. You can watch your families next winter stand up out of the ground week by week, knee-high, waist-high, then over your head, then over Duke's, a green standing sea you can walk into and vanish, the long leaves whispering against your shoulders with a papery sound like the field talking quietly to itself. In August it tassels and pollen hazes the rose in the morning light, and the ears fill, and you strip a husk back and press a thumbnail into a milky kernel the way your father does, and he watches you do it and doesn't check behind you, and that, him not checking, is a whole sermon. Harvest, when it comes, is the year folding itself up. Fodder pulled and shocked, pumpkins hauled in on the sled, the crib filling ear by ear, wagon load by wagon load. until your father stands in its door doing sums on a shingle with charcoal and comes out, this year again, ahead, enough to eat, enough to seed, some to trade, and enough, he says, looking at nobody, to think about hogs enough for a drive next fall, which is how money's going to come to this creek, on its own 4 legs, walk to market. And then the nights turn sharp and the frost comes back for the fence rails, and word goes around by way of the mill that the Suttons are husking come Friday, Hall Creek asked, and the year, you see it now, is not a line. It's a wheel. And it's in that October, the 2nd October of this story, with the crib full and the frost back, that your father hands you the year's last threshold, and he hands it to you the way he hands you everything, which is by not saying much. The smokehouse wants venison. That's all he says at breakfast, and then he goes to the woodlot and does not say, so go get it. He doesn't have to. The rifle is on its pegs, the powder horn is full from Danville, and the not saying is the whole message. Alone then. Your first deer entirely alone, tracked alone, shot alone, dressed alone, carried home alone. You have killed deer before, beside him, under his eye, his hand correcting your elbow. This is different, and every boy on this creek knows exactly how different, and no one has ever once explained it out loud because there is nothing to explain. You go before light the next morning, and I want to walk you through it slowly, because this, not the husking, not Danville, this is the day your body will keep. You know where. You've known for weeks the way you know everything now from the margins of other errands. A white oak flat on the far slope where the acorns lie so thick they roll underfoot, and the deer sign is beaten into trails, and there's a blowdown at the upwind edge a boy can fold himself into. You cross the creek on the riffle stones in the dark, cold striking through the moccasins like nails, and climb the far slope with your hand cupped over the rifle's lock against the dew, and fold into the blowdown while the woods are still deciding about morning, and then you do the hardest work there is, which is nothing. Stillness is a skill, and the cold grades it. First 10 minutes, easy. Then the chill finds the sweat from the climb and moves in. Your feet go from cold to aching to elsewhere. A stub of branch you didn't notice presses a slow bruise into your thigh, and you do not shift, because the flat is waking around you, and every living thing in it is listening for exactly you. The squirrels start their traffic. A pair of crows cross over with one comment each. A winter wren works the roots of the blowdown a yard from your knee, wholly unaware, and that, being so still the woods forget you, is a feeling like nothing else in this life, cold and pure, like being let stand inside a clock. The light comes up grey, then tin, then gold, in the treetops first, and the deer are just there. That's the truth of deer. They don't arrive, they appear. The flat is empty, and then it holds 3 does, 60 yards, feeding, materialised out of the grey like breath on glass. Your heart goes off like the hominy block. That's not poetry. You can hear it, Pom in your own ears, so loud it seems impossible the flat can't, and your hands, your steady, axe-broken, winter-proof hands, tremble. They tremble. Every hunter's do. Your father told you once, the day it stops mattering to you is the day to quit. And you breathe the way he taught you, out slow through the nose and pick the near doe, broad through the chest and wait for her to step clear of the sapling, and wait, thumb easing the cock back so slowly the click is a whole sentence, front sight settling low behind her shoulder and rising and settling with your breath. She steps. The rifle cracks, and the smoke blooms, and the flat erupts. White flags, drumming hooves, scattering birds, and then smoke haze and ringing silence. and you cannot see, and this is the worst half-minute of the hunt, every time, forever. Reloading with shaking hands, powder, patch, ball, ramrod, eyes over the smoke, and then walking forward through the powder smell to the place where she stood. She's gone 40 yards, no more, and she is down, and it was quick, done right, and doing it right is the whole job. And you kneel there in the wet leaves with your hand on her warm side and the ringing fading, and you say, "Nobody taught you this, or everybody did. Thank you," out loud, to her, or the woods, or God, or all three, your voice strange in the stillness. And then the work, which is red and careful and takes you an hour. Your knife hand slick, your sleeves rolled to the elbow in the cold, and then the carry, which is the true bill for everything, 80 pounds and better across your shoulders, her forelegs and hind legs gripped at your chest, down the slope, across the riffle, one wobbling, heart-stopping ice-water step at a time, and up your own field with your legs on fire and your spine compressed to a fist, and you will not put her down and rest where the cabin can see you, and the cabin can see you the whole way, and you know it, and that's why. Your mother comes to the door. Eli comes over the fence like the fence isn't there. And your father comes up from the wood lot with the axe still in his hand and looks at the doe and looks at you, sweat-soaked, blood to the elbows, trying with everything you have to look like a man to whom this is routine. And he says, "Where'd she stand?" And you tell him, "The flat, the blowdown, 60 yards, one shot," and he listens the way he listens to weather, and nods once and says, "Hang her by the smokehouse." That's all, that's everything. You knew it would be, and it is, and later that evening you catch him, through the door crack, standing at the smokehouse with a candle lantern, looking at your deer for a long time on his own, and you step back from the crack and never mention it, and neither does he, and that is how it is said. And the evenings get longer, and the fire gets more of you. And this is the part of the year that the letters east never mention either. Because how would you put it? That the hardest country makes the warmest rooms. That there is a species of comfort that only exists on the far side of that much cold and that much work and that much dark. Your feet on the warm hearthstones, the loom quiet, the wheel quiet. Nancy reading, Eli asleep in the middle of the floor like something dropped there, your mother's needles ticking, your father tallying the crib's corn on a shingle with charcoal and coming out, this year, ahead. Enough to eat, enough to seed, a little to trade. The wind trying the door holding. And before we put the day down, let me give you one last hour of it. The quiet one. The one nobody wrote in any letter east. Because how do you spend paper on an hour where nothing happens? And yet it's the hour of all of them I most want you to have. It's late. The others are down. You are the last one up because banking the fire is your job, and the job has, without anyone deciding it, grown edges. You are the one who closes the day. You make the rounds the way your father used to make them, and stopped making them sometime this year, which is its own quiet handing over. You check the door bar seated in its brackets. You check the shutter pegs. You stand a moment at the door crack with your eye to the cold seam of night, not because anything is out there, but because looking is the toll the dark charges, and you pay it every night, gladly. And the homestead talks to you while you listen. That's the thing about this life that no one born to pavement will ever quite believe. You can hear all of it every night, the whole estate doing its living in the dark. The cows lying down in the pen. You heard them go down an hour ago. That heavy triple thump and sigh, chewing endlessly, patiently, a wet grinding you could set a watch by. Duke shifting his weight, one hoof, the pen rail creaking where he leans. A hen complaining in her sleep in the loft of the little house, one soft descending note and settling. Mice. There are always mice, running their small commerce in the crib, and the corn whispering where they move it, and somewhere above them on a rafter you'd wager, the barn owl that pays for its lodging silent as a thought. The spring, faint and forever, down its 140 steps. The creek under everything, the woods beyond everything, doing what they do. Inside, the cabin has its own night voice. The fire banked ticks as the stones give their heat back. The logs of the walls creak as the cold takes them up. Tiny complaints, each one from a direction you know. You could name the wall. The clothes on their pegs, the strings of dried pumpkin rings swaying almost invisibly in the chimney draught, the loom standing in the corner with the web half woven on it like a held breath. Above you, your sisters turning in the loft, the boards reporting each turn. Behind the quilt, your father's sleeping breath, which is nothing at all, and your mother's, which you have to work to find, and Eli in the trundle bed, loud as a small stove. You do the fire last, down on your knees on the warm stones, and this is the ceremony now, isn't it? A full year of this story ago you knelt here in the cold dark hunting one coal, and here is the answer to that morning. You rake the evening's coals into their heap in the hearth's heart, glowing through their grey like something alive under a blanket, because that is what they are, and you draw the ash over them with the flat of the shovel, gently, thoroughly, the way you'd tuck a quilt, until the last red seam is covered, and the room goes dim and dimmer, and settles into the one faint ember glow that will hold there, patient, all night, keeping tomorrow. The same fire, still the same fire, carried into this clearing in an iron kettle, and never once in 3 years allowed to die. Your mother's fire and your keeping. There's a word for what you feel kneeling there, and the word is not happiness exactly, and it is not safety exactly, because this year has taught you the exact width of safety out here, which is the width of a fence rail, a door bar, a spring that doesn't fail, a neighbour 2 miles off who comes when the horn blows. The word, if it's any word, is held. Everything out there in the dark that could come, and everything in here that holds it off. And you, kneeling at the seam between them, part of the holding now. You get up. Your knees crack like your father's. You find the trundle bed in the dark by memory, table, bench, bedpost, and lie down beside your brother. And the cold comes to the edge of the blankets and waits there, where it belongs, and it can wait all night. You're tired now, I know, so let's put the day down where it belongs. You're in the trundle bed. Ely beside you, breathing slow, radiating heat like a banked coal, one arm flung over his head, wholly and completely asleep, the way only the very young and the very safe can be. Above you in the loft, your sisters breathing. Behind the quilt, your parents' low voices, winding down, a word, a pause, a word, then nothing. The fire is banked. You banked it. Under its grey ash blanket, the coals are keeping tomorrow, the way they keep it every night, the way one fire, fed and banked, can be kept alive for years. The fire in this hearth has never gone out since the day your mother carried it in from the burning heap of the first clearing, 3 summers ago, in an iron kettle, walking slow. Tomorrow you will kneel and rake and find the coal and blow, and the day will light from the day before, the way all days do. Your hands ache. The good ache. The salt seams in your knuckles, the axe blisters, the shuck burn. Your hands lie open on the quilt and throb quietly with everything they did, and it is somehow a comfortable feeling, like the hum in your legs after a long walk. You're warm at last, warm all through, the cold standing back beyond the blankets where it belongs. The cabin ticks and settles. A log shifts on the fire with a soft crush of coals. Outside, the frost is silvering the fence rails again, and the spring is running in the dark, 140 steps away, cold and faithful, and Duke is asleep on 3 legs, and the cows are lying in the pen chewing yesterday's grass, and the woods, the endless woods, are doing what they do at night, which is everything, and none of it, tonight, is any business of yours. Far off the wolves. You hear them, and your heart doesn't even move. The wall holds, the bar is down, your family is one room, and every soul in it is breathing. You're fed enough, warm enough, safe enough. You have a fire that has never gone out, and a door that bars, and people on every side of you whose breathing you could pick out of 100. That's more than most of the world can say. That's enough. The sounds go farther away now, or you're just listening less. The creak, the fire's small settling, Eli's breath. The boundary starts to blur, the way it does when the body has done a true day's work and has decided on your behalf that thinking is finished. Tomorrow there will be cows and water and wood. Tomorrow there will be the axe and the new ground and 200 trees. Tomorrow. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is just the warmth and the dark and the slow tide pulling. Centuries will pass. The forest you fear and fell will fall almost entirely, and men will spend fortunes replanting pieces of it. The trace to the mill will become a road, and the road a highway, and the half-day journey a spare 20 minutes. The cabin will rot into a rectangle of dark earth that a farmer's plough will whisper over. The wolves will go, and the panthers, and the last cane. Lights will burn all night in every valley you counted smoke in, so many lights that the stars over the knob will thin. But people will still live along Clear Creek, still work all day and ache at night, still count their children by firelight without seeming to, still check the door before bed, still lie down tired in the dark beside the breathing of the people they love, wondering what tomorrow will bring. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Samuel Tate in the trundle bed by the banked fire, 200 years and more ago. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.